Okay.
So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Marty, for speaking. It's great to have you. So Marty Britton is the president and CEO of Britton Management Profile, Inc., the first ever reference checking company in Canada. Incorporated in 1974, Britton Management Profiles, BMP, has been in business for over 47 years. BMP is passionate in helping their clients make informed hiring decisions so that they can hire the best talent available. With a strong global presence, BMP conducts verification checks in a variety of countries. When Marty took over the company from her father, the late David Britton, 27 years ago, the only service the company offered was reference checking. Continuing the bold Britton legacy, Marty has added a wide range of pre-employment screening services to their list of products, from criminal and credit checks, global sanctions, fingerprinting, education, employment verifications, and exit interviews. In addition, they are excited to offer social media checks by using the power of artificial intelligence to complement and enhance the ability to spot employment risk of hire far in advance. During the pandemic, as the needs of BMP's clients evolve, they are now going beyond the buzzwords and taking action to support businesses. Therefore, BMP is proud to strategically partner with a pandemic procurement compliance expert to provide full suite of services to empower businesses in hiring talent, reopening strategically, and thriving safely. Thanks again for speaking today, Marty, and good luck with your presentation.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for the introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? We've got a nod there? Okay. All right. I'm going to get started now. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Toronto Recruiters again for inviting me to be part of your talks. It's a great organization. Mark and his team do a great job. And this is the fourth time I've spoken at the Toronto Recruiters Conference. So it's been a lot of fun. So today we just want to talk about knowing who you hire, because it's a very important job. And the reality is job candidates lie. Now, normally I would like to ask this in a chat. I'd like to ask this in a chat if people can give me a sense on what percentage of job candidates do they think misrepresent themselves. Can I see some numbers there in the chat? What percentage of job candidates misrepresent themselves? I see an okay. Percent. We got 50%. Can I get any other numbers? 50%, okay. All right. First of all, I just want to tell you, while maybe some more people come up there, about our creepy guy here. We usually do this at conferences, and we bring a big banner, and this is, we don't want to give this gentleman a name, so we just call him the creepy guy. And if you were to come to our office, he would greet you at our door as the creepy guy. So what percentage of job candidates misrepresent themselves? 85%. Okay. 85% of candidates misrepresent themselves on their resume. And this is according to the 2017 Employment Screening Benchmark Report. 85%. That's quite a lot when you think about it. And now it may not be some great big huge scary audacious lie that they're making up. Sometimes it's something minor, but at the end of the day, the numbers are staggering. That is 85% of candidates that misrepresent themselves. And what does that cost you as an employer? What is that going to cost you if you hire someone who's misrepresented themselves? It's going to cost you 213% of their annual salary to replace an employee. So you can see it's pretty expensive. So let's look at this. For example, if you've got 100,000, if you're paying someone 100,000 a year and you've got to replace that employee and you don't do your due diligence and they find out that they lied, it'd be costing you $213,000 to replace that person. So it's very important to know who you're hiring and to make sure that somebody's not lying on their resume. Now, I got a little quick story to tell you about people lying on their resume. You have to think back to the time. I was actually one of those candidates a long time ago who lied about something to get a job. Now, you have to think of the time. It was 1974, and I was this kid, and all I wanted to do at that time was work at McDonald's. McDonald's is one of the best places for kids to work when they start. So you had to be 15 to work at McDonald's, and I was a couple of weeks away from being 15. So I thought, oh, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to just apply for this job and I'll see what I get. And then they asked me how old I was, and I lied about my age. Probably wasn't the first time I lied about my age, but I did end up telling them that I was 15. Different world. You couldn't do that today, that's for sure. But I did lie about my age to get my very first job. And I got to say, it was one of the best jobs I've ever had. If anybody has any kids and you're looking at getting those first time jobs, I recommend someplace like McDonald's. They really, truly do get customer service. And or someplace like Disney. I think it was one of those skills that I learned in that first job, even though I actually lied to get it, that really did make a huge difference in the way that I moved forward in my life. So it's pretty expensive. So you got to know who you're hiring, and now you know how much it costs to hire. So in the process, let's just go over a couple of things that are very important to hire, and then we'll dig down deep on each one of them. So one thing that's very important to do when you're hiring is reference checks. As Mark mentioned in my bio, we are the very first background checking company in Canada. We incorporated in 1974, and our specialty at that time was executive reference checking. We'll talk a bit more about that later. Employment, education verification, criminal checks, credit checks, all sorts of things. Social media checks are very important. We're going to really dig deep into the social media checks and what you should be looking for. Driver's abstracts. There are a number of things that are very important to check when you're making a hire. So let's focus on references here. They truly are a good indicator on how someone will perform for you. And if you are checking references, it's important to ask a number of probing questions to ensure that the reference that you're contacting is legit. That's very, very important to know that. References truly are a good indicator on how a candidate will perform for you. So if you're not checking references now, make sure you do. We are still kind of old school in the way that we check references. We ensure that we have one candidate who's checking all the references, one associate who's checking all the references for that candidate. We're still not inclined to throw them into call centers. We certainly would not send an email asking somebody to provide reference information. So we're kind of old school. We're still picking up the phone and making sure do references to the questions relate to the job positions. And more importantly, like I said earlier, one person must be responsible for doing all references for a candidate, because they truly are a good indicator on how that candidate will perform for you. So before you start anything, I kind of highly recommend that you take your time, you do your references, you qualify your references to make sure that they're legit, and you listen sometimes to maybe what's not being said from the reference. So that's a very important piece to that, listening to what's not being said and asking probing questions. So please make sure you check your references. What else is important to check? Employment verifications. Of those 85% of people that misrepresent themselves, this is one of the pieces that's pretty high where they do that. And where we see the most misrepresentation is in dates of employment. So they'll have, if someone's been laid off, they're going to maybe in some cases stretch the dates of employment that they have where they've worked so that they're not showing any gaps in their resume. They also tend to over-glorify significantly in what their position was, and obviously eligibility for rehire. Employment verifications, when conducted properly, will minimize any discrepancies in their work history claims. So please make sure you do your employment verifications. You typically start by calling the HR department of the company where the employee previously worked. That's usually a good starting place. And then they'll direct you from there as to where you go to get the employment verification. So please make sure you do your references and make sure you verify their employment. Education. Okay, this is huge. This is, again, another piece where we see a great deal of misrepresentation. So today with education, desktop publishing, all these wonderful things that we have, anybody can make up a degree from anywhere in the world that they have. So it's really important to make sure that there's not fraudulent degrees out there. We do see them all the time. When I look at a resume and if the candidate has put down, Bachelor of Arts, University of Toronto, I might look at that and think, no, they might not have graduated because they didn't have the word degree there. Little thing, Perhaps they were in the program, but at the end of the day, they don't have the word degree. So I would look at that and I would think, I don't think that they've actually graduated. So it's very important to make sure you check. You would start by calling the registrar's office. That's where you're going to find out that information from the registrar's office. They may or may not direct you to a third party repository. In Canada, the main one is Data, where you have to actually pay a fee to go into their platform and confirm the education for a candidate. You will be required to upload a consent form because we live in Canada and you must have consent before you go to verify someone's degree. So please, folks, make sure you are verifying, your education and make sure that it is what they have said it is. What else is important to check? Criminal checks. Now, some of you may or may not remember, but if we think back to that day, that beautiful September day, September 11th, 2001, I can't believe that it's been 20 years ago. That beautiful blue sky when that first plane went into the building in New York, that changed our world. That changed our worlds in so many ways. And I remember back to that day, and we didn't really realize the impact until that second plane hit that tower. And then we knew at that point that things were never going to go back to the way that they were before. And I think the big change in hiring after 9/11 was the fact that people didn't do criminal checks before that. It wasn't something that was commonly done at that time. So after 9/11, companies started to do criminal checks. In Canada, there are 3 different kinds of criminal checks that you're going to, that you can process. Most companies today process the basic criminal check. That will give you information into any local charges. There's also a criminal record check in the CPIC database, which is more at a national level. And there's also a vulnerable sector search for someone, say you're going to be having somebody working with the elderly or children. They're also now going to be asked to do a vulnerable sector search. Criminal checks were never done before 9/11. So it's really, probably now, what I look at our major seller and what we do every day is criminal checks. I can't think of a company that doesn't actually hire somebody without doing a criminal check. So if you're hiring, please make sure that you run a criminal credit check. A criminal check. And then that leads into credit checks, why it's important to run a credit check. Now, if you're going to be hiring anybody who works in financial services, you must run a credit check on them yourself. In Canada, there are 2 databases that you can get that information from. You can get it from Equifax, or you can get it from TransUnion. They're both good databases. Our company, we partner with Equifax. So when our clients are looking to hire someone who's going to work in finance, they're going to run a credit check. And again, it's about consent. We would have to have consent for that person to actually give us permission to do the credit check. We would enter the information into the credit bureau, and then we would provide that to our client. That would help give them some peace of mind in knowing who they are hiring. Another important thing to check, if you are hiring drivers of any sort, it's very important to do a driver abstract search on them. You want to know what their driving record looks like. Again, you'd have to have permission. So you'd be verifying driving records from the actual province where they live. You would have their consent, and depending on the province that they live would depend on the way that you would obtain that information. In Ontario, I got to say, Ontario, if you're hiring somebody in Ontario, it's super easy to obtain a driver record abstract. The information is almost available instantaneously once you log in and enter the information. Obviously, you have to have consent. Everything about in Canada is about consent. So you must have consent from the person that you want to hire. They send you the release form, and then you would log into whatever platform it is and do a driver's abstract. If you do have a lot of drivers on your force, it's important to probably run those driver's abstracts every year to make sure that they have a valid driver's license. This is now where we're going to really dig deep into the rest of this presentation, and that is going to be on social media checks. So what is important to check in terms of social media checks. And before we kind of get into this, it's really important to know when you're doing a social media check, you are only going to be verifying publicly available information. That's it. It's online, publicly available information. So remember that. You're not going to go online. You're not going to try to friend somebody and try to get into their back end of their system and get information from them. You cannot legally do that. So it's really important to know that again, just publicly available information is all that we're going to report on when a client comes to us and asks us to do a social media check. We're going to dive deep onto this now for a little bit. So obviously online use in the US and Canada is crazy. I mean, I can't think of a person who doesn't probably start their day online and end it online. And in between all that, they have access to all kinds of information. It's really, really amazing what kind of information that they will have done. And I'm just taking a question from Jeff here. Jeff, what does the difference between, we're going to go back to criminal checks for a second because I want to make sure Jeff's question gets answered because it's a very good question. So Jeff's question to the group was, what gets done differently for a vulnerable sector check related to a regular criminal check? Good question, Jeff. So there's three kinds of checks. There's the basic CPIC check, which is search of criminal record at the local database. There is the advanced criminal record check, which would include local and provincial databases, and we call that the CPIC check. And then there is the vulnerable sector check. How that is different is it searches for certain things in the database that could be a charge that affects vulnerable children. If someone's working with children, say you want to coach a sports team or something like that, you are going to be required to get a vulnerable sector check done. And that you have to get done yourself. And that depends, on which province or which city you live in and how you get that done. Most times we recommend people go directly to their local police department to get the vulnerable sector check done. Like I said, we used to do them by the hundreds until the government took that away from third parties such as ours. And you now have to go and get that information yourself. If you are hiring anybody to work with kids or anything like that, it's a very important check. So Jeff, I hope that answered your questions. And if it didn't, just let me know and we could always circle back offline on that. Okay, thanks, Jeff. All right. So back to online use. So as we know, we can see the numbers here, the number of people that are online in the US and why this is a very important thing to do. So let's look at the top platforms, social media platforms that are being used. Facebook still number one, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, pretty much those are the top ones. But at the end of the day, you got to remember that anything that goes on social media is going to stay on social media. And there are so many different platforms. You, as someone who's doing some hiring, should absolutely not be going online and searching someone that you want to hire. And we're going to talk about that now for the next little bit, because this is really super important. So what is impactful to employment? So now it's time to hire and you're thinking, I'm going to run a social media check on that person and see what I got. So consumers today, they're holding companies in high regards. So if one of your clients can easily pick up a quick Google search on a member of your company and find adverse content, your client's going to be asking, why didn't the company do the same thing? And why did they hire that person? Why aren't they doing something about it? Also, outside of external risks, social media can cause a ton of internal problems for a company. Employees are viewing someone making a racist post on Facebook, say, for example, is equivalent to them standing up in the office and yelling the same thing. We hear this all the time. We hear it started in the workplace and it ended up online, or it started online and it ended up in the workplace. So again, consumers are holding companies in really high values. Some areas of concern. So these are the area of concern for businesses. You see some HR buzzwords in here: hostility, harassment, bullying, safety, all items you would find in a code of conduct or a code of ethics policy. Another major concern here, and maybe the number one reason why large organizations reach out to us as a third party to do a social media check, is the risk of bad publicity. Nobody needs an employee's crazy Facebook post hitting the news. There's a duty of care that consumers and the general public expect companies to take in today's world, and effectively screening candidates or employees' social media is absolutely one of them. So warning, content is blurred out, but can be offensive to some. So what we do here is we aim to protect companies from the bad decision-making employees have made in the past. Plus, we are in a way predicting the type of decision makers they may be in present and in the future. So this is really important. What happens when an employee's crazy Facebook post goes viral? It's not good. So we are only capable and legally allowed, and you got to remember this, underline in bold, legally allowed to view publicly available information. And because of that point, these reports that we conduct are also a litmus test of sorts, testing an individual's level of responsibility. Just taking a note here to read some comments here. So how do you address social media in disappearing platforms like Instagram stories as an example? Okay, that's a good question. A lot of stuff stays, once it kind of is on the web, it stays on the web. Now, somebody may remove, and if I'm not answering this question correctly, please let me know. Someone may remove information from their social media, but it always stays in the back end. They may remove that off of their site. So, if you were to log in today, you wouldn't see it, but the filters that we use, once something is on social media, at the end of the day, it stays there and can always be found. So I hope that answers your question. And if it doesn't, we could always circle back. And I'll make sure that you all have my contact information at the end. And, feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I'm more than happy to help. Okay. So here we are. Do we want to trust this guy? If someone is the type of person to behave poorly online, well, that's one thing, right? But if they produce adverse content and have it out there for the public to see, that's a different thing. Can that person be trusted to represent your company appropriately? Poor decision habits and trends displayed on social media, they tend to lead to further poor decision-making in other aspects of their life, including the workforce. So this is really important why these social media checks need to be done. In the news, right here is what larger organizations especially report as to what they really don't want to see, what they don't want to see. Something hits the news. We receive Google alerts just about every day involving a certain company and something one of their employees did on social media. You do not ever want your company to be the victim of this and have their employees crazy posts, Facebook post or whatever, making the news. So this is why it's very important to do the social media checks. But this now leads to a very important question. You're probably thinking to yourself, well, why can't I just do that in-house? Good question, right? So here's some do-it-yourself facts. 70% of employees use social media. 70% of employers use social media to screen candidates. 70% of employers. That's crazy when you think about it. Of the companies that are conducting social media checks, 95% of them are done internally. This is not good. This is probably our biggest competitor, is companies doing this in-house. There are very strong reasons against this. For starters, it can be very costly, especially for companies hiring in high volume. Does your HR person really have the time? And are they being paid to scroll through someone's Facebook feed. And my God, if you're like me and you want to go in and check somebody out and you're looking through all these Facebook feeds, the next thing you know, you're off shopping for this and you're off shopping for that. It's really not a good use of one of your employees' times. But even if they did have the time, it can get very messy. It gets very messy because now they're playing detective. Think about that. Are they looking at the right John Smith in Toronto? What are they looking for? Have they created a program that's fair and consistent for everyone? Lastly, and here is the most important reason, and what most HR professionals already understand, that they are seeing information that cannot be unseen. So once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you're really no longer being an objective employer any longer. So again, very, very cost heavy. Think about that. $17 to $60 an hour to pay someone to be going online and doing all of these checks. And again, you're playing detective. You're going down that rabbit hole and how expensive it's going to be. And most importantly, like I said, once you see something, you can't unsee it, and you're putting your organization at risk because now you're no longer being objective. Oops, sorry, I just skipped one slide there. Okay, so let's look at this here, this slide. How many violations can you spot? If we pull up our friend Do-si-do here, immediately, as soon as we open this page, all kind of protected class action jumps out at us. Marital status, military status, or wait, do you think this candidate is pregnant? These are all things that you as a potential employer should never be looking at. Protected class examples. So these are areas I'm sure everyone is familiar with. They definitely cannot be used in a hiring decision. Viewing this protected class information can open up some huge liability risks for companies by creating biases, whether intentional or not. This is all the information that we can retract out of our reports so that at the end of the day, the end user will never know that we're there. And that's very important. If you're doing the hiring and you're going online and you're doing your own social media checks, they're going to be able to see that you were there. And then if you decide not to hire that person for whatever reason, they can pull that discrimination card, and then you as an employer are in a lot of trouble. So please be aware of this and don't become victim to this. So what exactly does our social media report include? So the following is our approach to social media checks, and definitely details what examples that we're looking for. Now, this slide here is very important. This is focusing on business-related online behaviors. These are the areas of risk we look for and we flag in our reports. The categories are what General Counsel likes to refer to as business-related online behavior. So we call these our 4 filters. We created these filters through our vast experience of working with many employment specialized lawyers and talking to many HR professionals throughout the years. Everything here is actionable and can be legally used in a hiring decision. That's a key. These things can be legally used in a hiring decision. Each of these filters then has a sub-filter, and we create clear definitions surrounding each filter and sub-filter. So as the search is conducted, the report is created in the same consistent manner each and every time. That's so important, is that again, the report's created in the same manner each and every time. You don't want to be just kind of like skirting and doing different things all the time. So this is really super important. And remember that we're focusing on business-related information only. Okay, so this is how the process works. So we start here. Your candidate provides us with the personal identifying information, which would be the resume. We typically ask for this information. You would typically find things on a resume such as names, city, state, province, email address, phone number, history of education and employment. So this resume is critically important. Associated persons or references, if we're speaking in terms of a resume, all this information that we accept and we begin running through our software. So we take the resume here, We run it through what we refer to as our magic software. So what our magic software begins doing is matching to first and foremost make sure we are looking at the correct John Smith in Toronto. This is where the human analytics piece comes in, okay? So we're going through the software. Now, we have to still get involved with human analytics, but we're not spending a couple of hours down in this rabbit hole here looking for information. We won't submit a report back to you unless we're certain that we have the right person. And as for finding profiles and often discover other pieces of information not already given to us, things such as nicknames. As we discover additional information, we run it through the software again. We bring this human Let me go back to this one. The human analytics piece again, we bring it, once we gather more information, we bring it back to the software and we continue to keep doing this. The next part involves machine learning, as I said, years of built-up data combined with the trained expert human analytics to make sure we look and capture with screenshots any content that falls within the parameter of our filters, the 4 filters that we talked about. Lastly, our software and analysts work together to redact any protected class information out of the report to complete the process. So again, we start with the resume, put it through our software. We do this can, become, depending on what information we're pulling out of the software, this can take time. We flag it, take out protected class information, and this will help you as an employer make informed hiring decisions. And how long does this process take? Typically 1 to 3 business days. It's just kind of depending on how much information is in there and the name of the person. If it's John Smith, it's probably going to go to the 3 days max because we got to go through a lot of profiles to make sure we have the right John Smith. So this is the operation process combined with the human analytics. This is what the final report looks like. So here are the features of the report and what it actually looks like. Each report has flagged content that will show what filters or subfilters it fell under, where it was found, how we identified the subject. We call those our matched bys. All the matched bys are highlighted in green and our flagged content in red. Again, everything that's flagged is actionable and compliant with the privacy laws and regulations. This is what we would give to you. And again, remember, it's compliant, focusing on business related information. It's actionable. This is all very important information to know when you're getting the final report. Intelligent data. So this is interesting here. So about 1 in 10 social media reports come back with at least 1 adverse hit. So 1 in 10. So the numbers aren't high, but you know what? You don't want to be that company hiring that one person. And some industries have hits that can be as high as 25 to 30%. So it's kind of industry specific as to what percentage you're going to get here for the intelligent data. But on the norm, 1 to 10%. 1 in 10 social media reports come back. 68% of reports come back with adverse hits, contain racist, sexist, or intolerable language. That's where we see the biggest percentage, the 68% in that area there. That's really important. 50% of the reports come back in more than one category. So they might be, derogatory language. So, we get 50% more that are crossing into several different categories. So that's important. And 8% of the people hit all 4 categories. So this is really super important, folks, that you're not doing your own social media checks. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble. And it's always important, if you have kids and they're setting up their own social media profiles, to make sure that everything that, you put on social media is going to potentially be in the eye of a former employer in future. So just to make sure that everything is good. And if you're hiring, make sure you add this component to your hiring process. That is it for the formal part of the presentation. Just another quick recap. I know Mark kind of introduced it at the beginning, but we've been in business, 47 years now. I do sit on the board for the industry. I sit on the professional background screening board, which helps me stay in touch and know what are certain compliance and issues. That's fairly important. We're also a diverse supplier in Canada. Our company is certified by WeBe Canada, and internationally, we're certified by WeConnect International. We do have an online platform. You should never be sending personal confidential information through email. We developed online requisition systems where all of our applicant information goes into there. And we have a long range. We're very diverse in terms of our client base, from tech companies to service companies to financial businesses, you know, human resource, all sorts of aspects. We have a very wide client base. And that's it for my formal presentation. So I just want to see if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, we can go back to the main screen at that point. So does anybody have any questions? Well, thanks for the questions that came in the chat earlier throughout. That was great. And I think that's it for now. So you can always reach me at marty@brittonmanagement.com, and feel free to reach out that way, and we'll also connect with everybody on LinkedIn. So we'll look back. We can also connect in the network session, and I guess we'll go back to the main stage now.
Hi, Marty.
So
Can you hear me okay?
Hey, Mark. Yeah, I can hear you okay.
Hi, I just wanted to say thanks for your presentation. It was really interesting. Definitely a lot of good content in there. I just had one quick question. If you could sort of, you know, what's one key takeaway, or maybe, you know, a few key takeaways that you think someone should take away from this presentation? Like, what's the sort of the key thing that people should keep in mind?
You need to know who you're hiring, and you can't just do that with one check. It's a combination of various things that you have to look at, what kind of checks you want to do, and what the position that the candidate's applying for. So don't just always go with, we only run criminal checks. Look at the position and then decide what you want to hire for based on that position.
Great. Well, yeah, I just want to say thanks again. It's great to have you at another event. It's always nice having you speak at our events. And just to let you know, so there is a recording available of your presentation. So if you'd like a copy, or if anyone in the chat would like a copy of these, certainly let me or Marty know, and we'd be happy to provide that for you. And just to let everyone else know, so our next round of sessions have actually started just a little bit at around 3 o'clock. So if you click the session tab, you can see that. And thanks again, Marty. It was great to have you.
Awesome. Thanks.
No problem.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.